Hello, everyone. First, I would like to thank everybody to be here. This is an honor for us to be promoting this event and this chat on such an important theme, such an important object for our country, to our development. I was really thrilled with the possibility of this debating this decarbonization of the steel industry within the framework of renewable hydrogen and renewable low carbon hydrogen debate that is going on in Brazil so much those last months. And I hope this debate that will enlighten and will bring some ideas for us to promote our economic development, green economic development, and promote also a possibility of collaborating globally so that we can rearrange our supply chains in order to have the most efficient way to produce green products, green goods, green wealth. And this debate is on steel supply, on the steel supply chain. And I think after this debate, we will be able to have some ideas on how to implement that in our own country. This is quite important because we see Brazil as a huge potential to help even decarbonize the global supply chain of the steel industry. Brazil has, for those that are not aware of, largely a renewable energy mix. Almost 90% of our electricity comes from renewable energies, and more or less 50% of our energy mix is also renewable. We do have a huge iron ore resource, as well as other resources. We do have land. We do have a lot of sun that makes the biomass grow faster than anywhere else. We do have a lot of brains. We do have a lot of diversity. And we do have an integrated system in the country that allows us to have almost a renewable electricity mix running and operating with a large amount of renewables inserted in the grid. So I hope that this debate will help us to come with probably or hopefully an industrial policy that makes sense, that makes us have a huge and very important role in the global decarbonization of the steel industry. With that, I pass the word for our keynote speaker, Frank Peter from Agora Energiewende. Agora is our partner in Germany. We learn a lot from them. And Frank was here in Brazil last week for 3 days. For him, he was with a very hectic agenda, but I think we could give him and us a view on what is going on in Brazil. Frank, with this, I pass you. Frank will have a presentation. We will have a 7 slides presentation and will be our keynote speaker.
Thank you, Rosanna, for this kind introduction. I hope you can see my slides now. Now also in presentation mode. And well, first of all, thanks for the invitation. And this is a great opportunity. The numbers and the data I will present you today are from our report on the 15 insights of the global steel transformation. We put it a bit in a Brazilian context for a better fit today. And I will rush through these slides. I hope we will get to the points thereafter. The slides will be available also after the presentation. So just to give you a bit of perspective, the global steel industry represents about, as you count, 7 to 9% of global greenhouse gas emissions. So it's a huge amount, and it's the biggest single sector responsibility. And so far, the industry was called a hard to abate sector, but we believe this is not true anymore. We can, from a technical perspective, have global steel sector being almost at net zero in the early 2040s. This is what we are convinced of. And this would lead to the point that we would have accumulated emissions compared to a business as usual scenario presented by Mission Possible. And this would also serve, the steel industry would also serve as an anchor for developing an international hydrogen economy. These are two huge things that could be provided by the steel sector going faster in decarbonization. And I would like to add why we believe this is doable. So first of all, the key technologies that will drive the change in the next decade are available. It's basically hydrogen-based iron making that will drive the transformation early on, next to, of course, secondary steel making. And we have those key technologies demonstrated at large scale. It's now about really scaling them fast. And this is what we want to achieve. Secondly, green steel is too expensive is often an heard argument. Well, this is true when you compare it to on the commodities level. This will add some 30 to 60% of additional cost compared to conventional steel, but it usually only represents a minor fraction of cost of the total final product. And this is where we definitely have opportunities to be better and improve. Sorry about that. This was an alarm in the hotel and I needed to fix that. Sorry about that. The third is one, it will require a lot of zero carbon hydrogen, and it serves as an anchor for ramping up a hydrogen economy, which is a key element to create demand to also ramp up the hydrogen economy. And secondly, the steel sector is in its last year's development really advancing faster than expected beforehand. And so it will turn over from a hard to abate sector in our understanding to a fast to abate sector, which is a key contribution also to the future climate debate. As you may be aware of, we are, when comparing current transformation pathways, quite far away from achieving a target well below 2 degrees as we have signed up in the Paris Agreement. We have a lot of implementation gaps going on, but also a lot of ambition gaps happening. And the steel sector here, as this slide shows, can contribute quite a lot to advancing the agenda. This is, from our perspective, also relevant for Brazil, since Brazil will be hosting the COP in 2025. So advancing an international steel transformation agenda will also help up in the ratcheting up process in 2025 in the COP in Belém, where we will definitely need to adjust our ambition level and go faster globally as a community to avoid harm from climate change. What the steel sector also provides, and especially green iron trade provides, is a competitive scenario for international seaborne green hydrogen trade. If you look on the left side, you see that hydrogen costs, production costs in the green iron case, in countries like, for example, Brazil, Australia, or South Africa, are about $1.5 per kilogram of hydrogen. If you then add just seaborne trade reconversion via any H2 carrier, like, for example, ammonia, or if you ship it as liquid hydrogen, the costs increase drastically to over at least $4 per kilogram. And it will not be competitive, from our understanding, with pipeline transport of hydrogen, for example, within Europe or within other nations. So that's a reason why we think to really access low-cost hydrogen potentials of the global south for global north economies, one of the key elements will be to put the hydrogen embedded in a certain product. And here, green iron is a very good one. And this bears some substantial cost advantages, as you can see on the right side, of up to 20% per green iron production cost. And this is what we see as a key element for commodity to become rather fast cost competitive compared to its conventional alternatives, so that it really can drive a fast agenda of decarbonizing the steel industry globally. What about jobs? What impacts it has? Well, we think for the green iron ore exporters, it's a case where if you add the next step to just the hydrogen production, the next value chain, and combine it with green or with high quality ores, you can gain a lot of jobs in a certain economy. So for countries like Brazil, Australia, South Africa, there's a potential in it to drive also, well, a job program with such an initiative. It creates value added for the economy. And on the other hand, the potential green iron importers from the global north do not lose that much of jobs. We calculate this around 5% of the future steelmaking processes are dedicated to making the green iron, but you, on the other hand, substantially lower the cost of your green steel products, which of course increases then the competitiveness of downstream value chains. And we think here is definitely a win-win option for both global north and global south countries to align on the topic of green iron trade, and where we definitely see potentials looming for accelerating the agenda and make both profiting from such an agenda. Lastly, to unlock the full speed and scale of the green steel transformation, we require an international level playing field where all these kind of, let's say, win-win situations can be dealt with. We see here displayed the biggest 5 iron ore exporters in the world, amongst them Brazil, South Africa, of course, Brasilia, Canada, and Ukraine. And you see the biggest importers of so far iron ore. You see the European Union, China, Korea, Japan, and Taiwan. And we definitely have here a situation where we can build an ecosystem internationally that those exchange of and the supply and demand matching of green iron needs and green iron availability can be fostered in order to create this market, to kick off a market where investors have the security to go and do the high capital intensive investments for this required ramp up of the green iron trade. For example, an idea that looms around is to create a green steel buyers club, which would, of course, do some sort of the demand and supply matching that is highly needed to de-risk investments, especially in the global south, for going all the way. So this was my short introduction. I hope we'll have a beneficial discussion, and sorry for the interruption by the alarm in the hotel.
Thank you so much, Frank, for this enlightening presentation. I would say that numbers there and everything that you said points out to something different in our global supply chain and a lot of opportunities for job sharing, power sharing, friendshoring, a lot of shorings. So I would, on this topic, ask Margaret from Steelwatch to give us her view from a global perspective on how she sees those kind of concepts apply to our economy and globally. How can we help? Margaret, the floor is yours, please.
Very good. Thank you, Rosanna, for that introduction. And thank you, Frank and the entire Agora team who have put this research out into the world. It's a great service to the movement. And it's an honor to be with E+ Energy Institute today. I'll start with, I guess, kind of a little bit of kind of high level of kind of how I interpret some of this information. I think particularly on the green iron side of things, which I think is a keen focus because of Brazil's potential competitive advantage there, and kind of the win-win conversation or theme that Frank highlighted, which I think is really exciting. But I'll kind of take a step back as well into kind of the deeper data. So if you read this entire study, which came out in June, and since then, I think, this is probably one of the clearest technical analysis around that Agora has provided that makes it really crystal clear that we can and we must phase out the use of coal in steelmaking. And so for those who are either very familiar with steelmaking or not as familiar, we're still looking at a world that is about 70% of the global steel produced from blast furnaces, basic oxygen furnace process, with using a lot of coal. And that's where the majority of that 7 to 8% of emissions comes from, is using that coal in the process. And so the points that Frank really highlighted are about how do we move away from that, particularly when it comes to primary production. So not the secondary electric arc furnace with scrap, which is about 30%, but particularly for that primary production of new virgin steel. And so I think that's a really critical point to kind of call out. And I think the lessons we learned from the power sector of coal phase out and towards clean energy transition and clean electricity, I think we need to start applying some of those lessons to the steel sector, and start to kind of thinking around how do we really accelerate that levelized cost of production, and kind of the changes in the value chain that need to occur. And I think green iron making is really one of the chief things that we need to do. I also really appreciate Frank's framing around fast to abate. I think that is, for those of us who've been around working on steel for a while, that's a really exciting phrase to hear. And I would completely agree on one hand, and at the same time, it's not fast enough, right? The challenge we are up against, particularly between now and 2030, is that we really need to be aligning the steel industry with the 1.5 trajectory by 2030. That needs to be our goal. Whether or not the world debates whether or not 1.5 C is still achievable, our job is to keep that alive and still to keep that real ambition alive no matter what. And the reality is we have about 2,300 days left between now and 2030. That's it. And so the question is, how will we stretch that time? How will we make the most of that time? I think it's really important to think about steel and how we transform the value chain, rather than kind of having the path dependent approach that we've had for decades, if not really centuries, around steelmaking. And I think this is an opportunity where Brazil could really lead because of its potential for competitive advantage around green iron making. And to really think of it as something that, as Rosanna pointed out, to really form or even strengthen alliances around with countries that could be importing clean green iron, and do the actual steel making and rolling and casting, where a lot of the jobs are, in keeping those things in place. And so I think there's also one of the things we want to be able to call out as well is that there's roles for, and particularly in terms of global South, global North, there's a real responsibility for OECD and particularly global North countries to lead here. And in terms of investment in technology, making sure that we can have climate safe trade, but that there are significant and credible, effective on-ramps for countries over time, so that you're not simply locking people out permanently, but really creating the incentives for change. And that, yeah, so I think those are some of my main points. The one, I think, caution in the overall kind of study, and I think a critical question for Brazil to reckon with, is the question around biomass and BECCS. And in this study, it does include some limited amount of potential for biomass and BECCS, I think much less than others had anticipated in the past. But really, outside of Brazil, this isn't as much of a debate and question. It's just not something that seems as viable, and a lot of folks are also kind of concerned about the potential biodiversity and forestry impacts from that. And so I think really careful, nuanced consideration of that year to year, I think is really, really important. Also understanding, though, that each country has autonomy and sovereignty and has to decide these things for themselves ultimately, but in the relative global context. So with that, I would say the other things I would highlight are, from Steelwatch's perspective, we're looking obviously at driving climate action. We're also looking at the whole ESG impact of steelmaking, from human rights, labor rights, air and water pollution. And I think those are things that companies like ArcelorMittal or Ternium are really going to have to start reckoning with in a very, very real and near-term way, in order to, I think, credibly be able to make the argument that they're climate leaders. I think it's hard to be a climate leader and not still and still have, you know, other issues outside of that that impact local communities. And so I think we have to kind of look at this as kind of the whole ESG package.
Yeah.
But I'm particularly excited for the next year in Brazil. I think it's, you know, this country is going to emerge and really come into the spotlight as a global leader on green steel.
Thank you so much, Margaret. It is well, promising times if we do the right thing. And considering doing the right thing, I think it's worth for us to listen from Frederico. He's from the state sitting on the biggest and hugest iron ore exporter here in Brazil, together with Pará. Good quality iron ore with Vale and so on. So Frederico, I would love to hear from you on Minas Gerais perspectives, and how do you see this green steel thing evolving in the state of Minas Gerais. And by the way, Guilherme is also from there, so we will have two guys from Minas Gerais talking to us today. Frederico, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rosana. For us, it's a pleasure to be here in this summit. The decarbonization of the economy is one of our priority here in the state of Minas Gerais. And our governor was in New York participating of this agenda. And we also are committed to this global challenge to reduce emissions by 2040, 2050. Minas Gerais is one of the largest producers of iron ore, as Rosana mentioned, and also of steel, in one of the largest producers of steel in Brazil. And we have some, we already have some attributes that are good for the environment and good for this effort we are all doing now. Our energy matrix is really clean. Almost 100% of our energy comes from hydraulic power or solar energy. So we are good. We have a good position in this matter, and we know how important to the steel industry energy it is. And we also here in Minas Gerais, we use a lot of charcoal coal from vegetal coal that comes from
Biocharcoal.
I'm sorry?
Biocharcoal.
Yes, that's it. And 100% of our pig iron production comes from this kind of product. So it's already cleaner than the average, I would like to point. And our companies here, we see that they are really committed to this effort, and also the government. So we are working together to have a steel production cleaner than it is now. And we also have here a good potential of producing biogas and biomethane that can replace gas from fossil sources. And we believe with the hydrogen path will be a really important way here also in Minas Gerais. We are discussing with some companies to start developing this alternative here in the state. And we see this goal to reduce emissions as a really good opportunity to create jobs and the new industrialization in Brazil, and especially in Minas Gerais. And it's a really priority for us here to work in this context. I would also like to point that we already have a climate change plan, and we are doing now a roadmap. So how to show us how we can achieve this goal of decarbonization in the next years. So each sector of the economy of Minas Gerais is being looked for us, and with the partnership with the companies to reduce emissions and to be more competitive in this matter. We have some studies also showing the potential of biomethane in Minas Gerais, and we just launched a new policy here in Minas Gerais to enhance the production of biogas and biomethane. And we also have this work team that are dedicated to create new policies to enhance our economy. So as this is a really important priority for us, and we are largest producers of steel in Minas Gerais, we believe that in the near future, we will be one of the main players in the global economy of offering green steel for the economy. So Minas Gerais is really committed to this effort, and we can count on us in this effort, in this matter, to make the world a better place.
Thanks, Secretary. It's good to hear, because Minas Gerais is sitting on one of the largest global resources on iron ore and green iron possibilities, and this will mean that local government will also have to play an important role in terms of industrial policy incentives, right incentives. Why not a hydrogen hub in Minas Gerais to well located to provide hydrogen and green solutions for the industrial plants that are in Minas Gerais? Let's see. Let's work for that. Thank you so much, Secretary, for your information. Now, I would love to hear from a federal government point of view, the head of the Brazilian Council for Industrial Development, Verena. She's giving us the point of view from the federal government, how the federal government is first trying to deal with this green economy, and also if anything that is said here in terms of the steel industry is going to be included or are an object of some specific industrial policy from the federal government. Verena, please, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Rosana. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I'd like to start by complimenting the event organizers and my colleagues who shared this panel with me. It's a great pleasure to be here today to talk about Brazil's new industrial development policy, which we are building with the support of the Brazilian society. The National Council for Industrial Development is a council of the presidency of Brazil, and it was created or it was recreated in this new Lula government with the aim of proposing to the President of the Republic national policies and specific measures aimed at promoting the country's industrial development. The council is made up of 21 ministers and 21 representatives of the civil society. It was created in 2004 and played an important role until 2016, and it was abandoned during the Bolsonaro's government. President Lula recreated the CNDI, and in my opinion, it was the main change is the creation of the Executive Committee, which is a government technical forum responsible for articulating the public policy of industrial development as a state policy and not just as a ministry policy. I consider that this council plays a fundamental role in our current geopolitical context, as different countries around the world have redesigned their industrial development policies, considering the resilience of their national production chains. I also think that Brazil is designing a modern industrial policy, which is in line with what other countries have done, or actually they are doing. We are designing our policy based on social missions. In other words, it's about understanding the industry as one of the tools for the development of our society. The mission is the main problem we want to solve. Brazil has gone through a long period of disindustrialization, and reversing this process is one of Lula's government priorities. The neo-industrialization, as we call, has two main premises: the innovation and the decarbonization. Furthermore, in the policy document, we set out some principles that should guide the missions. They are socioeconomic inclusion, equity, in particular of gender, color, and ethnicity, promotion of decent work and improvement of income, productive and technological development and innovation, increase in productive and competitiveness, reduction in inequality, including the regional ones, sustainability, and qualified international insertion. We have established 6 development missions within the Council. The first, the sustainable and digital agro-industrial chain for food, nutrition, and energy security. The second, resilient health industry economic complex to reduce the vulnerability of our health system and to expand the access to health. The third, sustainable infrastructure, sanitation, housing, and mobility for productive integration and well-being in the cities. Digital transformation of the industry to increase productivity, bioeconomy, decarbonization, and energy transition and security to ensure resources for future generations, technologies of interest to national sovereignty and defense. For each of the missions, we established some specific objectives that are the goals that catalyzes investments and innovations in many different sectors and inspires collaborations in the implementation of the projects. Besides, we propose a goal for our society to achieve. We call them aspirational goals. They are at the same time ambitious, challenging, and realistic goals. They are responsible for guiding all the activities and instruments necessary to implement the policy. In the case of the mission of bioeconomy, decarbonization, and energy transition, the goal is to make Brazil a world leader in low carbon industry in the production of inputs for clean and renewable energy and in biosubstitutes for the petrochemical chain, in regenerative agroforestry systems, mastering technologies at the frontier of technology. It's important to say that a substantial part of the country's energy matrix is low carbon, as we have already said, which could put it into put our country in an advantage in the international energy transformation race. Also, when we qualify the mission, we consider that the expansion of renewable energy in the energy matrix can generate new business and jobs opportunities. Finally, modernizing the regulatory framework for the energy sector can attract investments and promote innovation. Therefore, the specific objectives of the decarbonization mission we presented for the Council for the ministers are to expand the productive capacity of Brazilian industry through the production and adoption of input including critical materials and minerals, low carbon, energy efficient technologies and process, to strengthen production chains based on the circular economy and the sustainable and innovative use of biodiversity, develop bioeconomy industry, and promote the valorization of standing forests and sustainable forest management, to densify our industrial chain for the energy transition with a view to autonomy, energy efficiency, and the diversification of the Brazilian matrix, to develop strategic technologies for decarbonization, energy transition, and bioeconomy, to ensure energy security, stimulating low-cost oil and gas production with a low carbon footprint. The next steps, just to comment to you of our work, is first to define our priority niches for the missions. This is why I consider this seminar so important. I'm learning a lot. As an issue, as the issue of decarbonization of decarbonizing the economy is an absolute priority for our government and requires us the support of the entire productive sector and industry workers, of course, we are organizing in the first half of October a series of workshops with the civil society in order to identify our bottlenecks in decarbonization and resilience in our national production chains for all proposed missions. In these workshops, we would also like to talk to the Brazilian civil society about the public policy instruments necessary to advance the final design of the policy, which must be delivered by the C&I to President Lula at the next council meeting, which should take place in the early December. I would like to finish by saying that it's a great pleasure to be here sharing these informations with you and learning about the topics that are so necessary for what we are doing now at CNDI. Thank you very much again for your invitation and anxious for the questions.
Verena, thank you so much. And I've been eyewitness to the effort that is being done in Brasilia to develop all this industrial policy that will lead to decarbonization. And I think steel industry, the steel supply chain is one of the key ones for us as Brazilians to look at. There are many ways of doing it. The way that Frank presented in the beginning, the hydrogen way is one of them. We do have the biocharcoal also as one thing embedded in our culture, but the hydrogen one is one clear path that has to do with the hydrogen economy. And it's good to hear that in October you're gonna have, we will have the opportunity to chat with the government and help to build this industrial policy, because we will need some specific industrial policies. And on the other round or in the questions, I think it's good for us to better understand how Haddad, our Minister for the Economy, is thinking on the green bonds that the Brazilian government is going to release. And maybe it's a way, together with CFDs or other financial instruments, to help us to unlock the technological change that is needed for this to happen, together with some demand. And with that note, Guilherme, I leave the floor to you, because of course you as a producer still in belonging to the global supply chain must have a very particular view on what we have to do in order to unlock this green steel or green iron possibility for our country. Guilherme, please, the floor is yours.
Yes, you thank you for the invitation, for the possibility to participate here. You let me at the end, which is good, because I can say whatever I think about the other speech, but it's not good because I agree but disagree with some things that were said here. But anyway, I try to bring some points for thinking about this issue of steel production and giving some highlights concerning Brazilian situation. First of all, ArcelorMittal is a huge company, one of the biggest company producers in the world. We have very clear targets to be 25% reduction in terms of intensity until 2030 and to be neutral 2050. I think we were the first steelmaker and the first big companies to assume a target to be neutral in 2050. It was very outstanding at the time, 2019, something like this. We made this approach worldwide. And I will start the conversation saying that there is a good news and a bad news. And with this bad news, I will disagree with some of the points that were done. The good news is that we know how to make green steel. It is possible to make green steel. We know how to make green steel. And the bad news is that's going to cost a little bit more. That's the big point. Of course, I know that Frank shows some numbers that in terms of the participation of the cost of steel, but these are numbers that I don't want to stress here right now, but all the time I would put a question mark to be more deeply in terms of region, not in terms of one reality, because the things that are happening in the world regarding steel are different from region to region. Europe, South America, North America, Brazil, and so on, and China, and everyone. And this is the first point I would like to put. The second point is that I consider the steel sector is yet hard to abate. It's already yet because technologies are not 100% consolidated. They are under development. They will be consolidated 2030. 2030 it's a magic year in terms of commitment for everywhere. Technologies for a breakthrough are going to be in place and so on. And probably in 2030 until 2040, things are going to be more concrete and so on. That's why I think, Frank, 2040 to be neutral in the steelmaking sector worldwide is very, very, I would say, ambitious. This is a very big ambition on that. And this is the point. And bringing to Brazil, Rosana, you put in the beginning very nice. Brazil have lots of advantages in terms of electric matrix, in terms of land, in terms of sun, wind, in terms of the culture to use biofuels. I highlight the ethanol issue, but anyway, for these two sectors, the charcoal use. But also have people enthusiastic here. You didn't tell you didn't tell this. We have people that are very enthusiastic in Brazil. I would say different from most of the other countries, and are very inclined on this. And in the steel sector, it's quite the same approach. But you have to consider that the percentage of integrated coal-based in steel is quite the same at the rest of the average in the world. It's almost 70%. So we have charcoal, but the biggest part of production in Brazil is integrated coal-based, with the big blast furnace we have in the companies that have here. And this changing for new process are going to take time to change, to implement the breakthrough technologies, and it costs money. We have recently finalizing a study within ASSO Brazil, which is the steel sector. And we got some interesting numbers that we should talk later, Frank, with your numbers, because some things in Brazil are not 100% applied. I will highlight 3 points in the roadmap. The first point is that natural gas should be considered. Natural gas should be considered in Brazilian decarbonization path, not as a solution, but as a step, because we have natural gas in Brazil, but at the same time, we have a very expensive natural gas in Brazil. If we consider the price we use nowadays, $16, $17 per million of BTU, it's not compared with the magic number, which is 4 to 6. There is a magic number for natural gas. If we have natural gas, $6 per million of BTU, we can make steel very good, and it's a competitive price. This is the point. The second point, also not mentioned in the speech before, is the use of carbon capture and storage in use. Within this study in the ASSO Brazil, it will take a very, very important part of the decarbonization. Sometimes almost 30% of the emissions in 2050 could be covered by a CCU-CCS. And CCU-CCS has a price, and it's not something that is forever, okay? We know that have enough reservoirs in place to put CO2, but you'll finish someday, 2080, 90s, 100s, I don't know. Okay, so this is something that has to be in the table and has to be in the analysis. And the last one, which is of course, I have to mention biomass. Biomass is necessary. ArcelorMittal is following biomass worldwide, not only in Brazil, but worldwide. But it has a cost. It has to evolve the cost. We had talked this, Federico and I, some some months ago, I think, about this issue and about Minas Gerais state. Minas Gerais has good policies and so on. I believe that if Minas Gerais can influence the country with the policies that we have in terms of having this decarbonization technology and so on, would be very nice. And biomass is very specific at Minas Gerais state. Okay, the big companies that produce steel in Brazil are located in Minas Gerais state. The pig iron, he told, pig iron is only pig iron, it's not steel. It's 100% produced by biomass. And in Minas Gerais state has the, I would say, one of the best legislation regarding the production and use of biomass and so on. So it's very good, better than the rest of the country, I would say. But biomass has some limits in terms of the steel participation because of the size of the blast furnace. Okay, so you have to change, okay, from a new process, and you come to the very beginning of the point to change to breakthrough technologies and so on using that. Okay, so biomass is this, what I think, and the last is hydrogen. Hydrogen is the solution, but $1.5 is the dream price of everyone. Even in Brazil, numbers we have are far from this in terms of having this in the near future. Okay, but I'm sure that considering the long term, we are going to be near $2, $1.5 possible. And with this price and the amount of hydrogen production, which should be enough for the needs in terms of the steel making in Brazil, we are going to make the real conversion of blast furnace to DRI and the other kind of technology that will happen that use hydrogen. And only with hydrogen, we are going to be completely free of the carbon issue and CO2 emissions and so on. And that's the main highlights I would like to put in this very beginning. But I'm confident. I just would like, maybe you can say, oh, Guilherme, you're against and so on. No. Just putting some question mark to think about some projections, because we are projecting. We are in 2023. We are projecting things that should happen. We have to work on what we need at national level, state level, and company level in terms of policies and directives and all the things and the access to money to put these new technologies in place and so on. All the things it's necessary to go to the path. I'm completely sure 2050 Brazil is going to be neutral. This is real. This is my only prediction long term. I would say Brazil is going to be neutral 2050 for sure. And but there is a big path to go through. Okay. So Rosana, this is my first highlights on that. I'm not going too much because you're almost in the time in the final.
Yeah, we have
10 minutes. Huh?
Thank you so much, Guilherme. We have 11 minutes left, so let's see if we do a mix between continuing the debate and some of the questions from the audience. I knew you would bring a very grounded perspective to all of us here, Guilherme, and I appreciate that very much. But hearing you, I think what we see is that it's we do need some kind of matchmaking between green demand and potential green suppliers. And this matchmaking, once there is someone willing to pay part of the green premium abroad or any of the green premium, but at least is interested in buying some green products abroad or in Brazil, then we will know what kind of industrial policy and industrial incentives we should put in place in order for us to be able to sell the product at the price that the international market is buying. So what I see is that a kind of a chicken and egg thing that goes around and round. And one thing that Frank said that in the beginning, and Margaret also mentioned, is that one of the ideas is perhaps to form some negotiating round tables between potential suppliers and potential demand. And then together with some state governments and federal governments incentives, I mean, not only subsidies, okay? I mean, it can be some blended finance, some kind of CFD, as Frank mentioned when he was here in Brazil, and I went a little bit deeper on that. So what I see from your talk, from the market talking, is a big mismatch still between what is needed and what the world says it wants to buy, and the ones that are able to provide that kind of product, but doesn't have any kind of line of sight on to whom am I going to produce this thing for, because it really costs more. You have to do a technological change in order to go there. On a small note on natural gas, yeah, we will have to agree to disagree there, but that's fine. So we do have 8 minutes left. I don't know, I saw that many of the questions of the audience has already been answered during the Q&A. There is one from Vivian. What are your perspectives on the price of commodities and the additional necessary cost to decarbonize? Would it be possible to, and how to reflect decarbonization costs on the commodity prices? This has a lot to do with what I just said. I don't know. Frank brought in his presentation some of the numbers, but that depends very much. If you are selling to a niche market, really niche market, automobile market, for example, they are perhaps willing to pay a little bit more than someone buying bread. So that depends very much on how much the end customers is willing to pay for this green
I can add some words if you permit.
Yes, and then I would like to listen from the others.
Okay, very briefly, I think it's Vivian from Valiant probably is the responsible for the decarbonization value. But anyway, there is a tendency in the global customers to pay a premium price on the green steel. Let me say like this: ArcelorMittal has started with a product which the name is XCarb. XCarb is just a simple way to make green steel. One part of the production is low CO2 emissions, or even though zero CO2 emissions, and so it's possible to do that. But it's not a reality 100% in Brazil. That's the big point. We had some discussions with a certain client in Brazil, and he was asking for green steel. We can produce green steel, okay? Green steel, okay. And when we started to talk about the premium price, no, I don't want to pay premium price. I want a discount. And so the idea is different. And then when we have clients in Europe and some automotive sector, which are more global, they are talking about this, and they are more able to that. This is the in between the egg and the chicken, I think, which is the transition of these two things. Because as long as the client can pay a part of that, it's going to start, and we can use this production to support new technologies and disruptive technologies until having the technologies after 2030, something like this.
Great. As we go for our last five minutes, there is a question here direct to Frank. Considering the major share and position of China in the steel global market, how do you push them in the direction of decarbonize their production? How can we enforce them to accept import DRI from Brazil instead of iron ore, shutting down their huge fleet of coal-fueled blast furnace? Before answering to that question, which is a very tricky one and has everything to do with what we've been discussing here in terms of job sharing and global collaboration, because if nobody wants to give up any of its position, there is no solution, apparently. I just want to grant the word to both Frederico first and then Verena, just to give your final remarks. And then we will pass a little bit from our 60-minute sections in order for Frank to answer this final question, okay? Frederico, if you want to go first and give us our final remarks. Very quick, please.
Okay, Rosana, thank you.
Thank you, Frederico.
I would just like to emphasize that Minas Gerais have a lot of capabilities here in our economy that make us a good path to the decarbonization of the economy and to contribute to this effort to have green steel and other resources coming from a green footage, you know. And I would like also to emphasize that our energy matrix is really clean, and that is a really important attribute to have green hydrogen, to have green products in the near future. So we are really open to discuss how the state of Minas Gerais can help the companies and help the society, how we can make our economy more competitive and have the costs in a good path to the consumer in the end, so they can buy this green product. So I would like to emphasize that is a really important priority for us, and we see as an opportunity to have more income and more companies and more jobs here in the state. So we are working together with the companies, with the technology institutes, and we hope to contribute really hard to the world in this matter. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Frederico. And it's really happy for me to listen the state government as involved, as well as the federal government, in putting together some industrial policy that allow this thing to happen. Because once we have the numbers, we have to see how to overcome the issues that Guilherme brought us so clearly to us and so grounded to this debate. I'll pass the word to Verena, and then I know Margaret has raised her hand, and then Frank, you can please answer to the question that I made. And then we will pass a little bit more than 60 minutes, but that's okay. I have the authorization here from the technical team to go there. Verena, if you want to just pass us your final remarks and some observation based on everything that we discussed here.
Thank you very much, Rosana, again. Just reacting to your comments about the finance plan on decarbonization, I think that among the actions developed by the Ministry of Finance and decarbonization, even more important than the carbon bonds, is the green taxonomy, which will be launched for public consultation at an event this afternoon, and I invite you all to participate on this public consultation. The green taxonomy is something that many countries have been working on. The United States has it, the European Union has it, Colombia has it, and Brazil will have it soon. I think that the green taxonomy must guide our investments to decarbonize our economy. So it's important because it's not being designed as a binary thing, and it's considering our regional difference and the economic situation of the different locations in Brazil. And I think it's an important issue that to generate a safety environment and make clear to the world that the matters to Brazil from the point of view of our bioeconomy and our decarbonization needs. So I invite you all to follow this matter. Thank you again for the invitation, and thank you for the things I learned today.
Thank you so much, Verena. I really put a lot of hope and, I don't know, all my technical efforts, if possible, our technical efforts, in order for you to succeed with CNDI and everything that has to be done. I'm glad to have you there, and thank you so much for participating. Margaret, I know you have raised your hand and you have a lot to say. Please go there, and then I pass the word to Frank to answer to the China question.
Excellent. Thank you. I will be as brief as possible. And I just want to echo and support Verena and the Industrial Commission, the National Industrial Group, for having this open and hopefully transparent dialogue with civil society and communities around the country. I think that's a global model for how these conversations need to be had, and I'm really anxious to see the results and hear who participates and kind of how the administration, the Lula administration, evaluates those opinions from different perspectives around the country. But I gotta say, I was kind of disappointed in Guilherme's remarks in terms of, it felt like I was listening to a panel from 5 years ago in terms of kind of the level of ambition that I was hearing. I think whether you're civil society or a state governor or state actor, or a part of a major producer like ArcelorMittal, I think we really have to raise a level of ambition. The current level that the global company, 25% intensity reduction by 2030, that really actually says nothing, because that's all, you could grow your company twofold and your intensity reduction might be improved. And yes, that's a good thing, but it's likely not good enough. Overall, your net reductions could go up. And so I think we need much more specific, much more ambitious plans at the global level and down to the country level, where ArcelorMittal has grown quite a bit in the last few years, acquiring new companies. I think what we're looking at in terms of reducing the green premium is very achievable, very doable. And I think we have to stop talking about things like CCUS or blast furnaces, because those have really been, frankly, discredited at the global level. And whether it's the IEA, Bloomberg New Energy Finance, or Agora, these are things that are less and less viable from an analytical perspective, and just have a lot of technical infeasibility, particularly in the near term. But if they're, if investments go towards hydrogen and GRI and other things like that in the near term, and no other, anyways, it's not a very, at this point, in my opinion, and I think the opinion of a lot of technical analysis, a credible talking point whatsoever. We can talk about it for potentially other applications, but not for blast furnaces. Really anxious to hear, I think, particularly on where the conversation and the open dialogue that Verena is leading around biomass. I think I want to kind of respect that, Brazil has a history on this. It's unique in the global arena, but we want to be really, really careful and really nuanced. And there are a lot of conversations that have come before around responsible steel or other voluntary standards, and conversation around standards that's happening globally right now in terms of trade. And so I think it's something we want to be sensitive to, but also nuanced. Our forests have enough threats onto them. And I think the steel industry doesn't want to wade too far into those waters. Other companies do that quite well. So just a word of caution on that. But very excited to see what Brazil does in the next year and a half in the lead up to COP and G20.
Great, Margaret. And also a very refreshing perspective on how we have to raise ambitions. 2050 is too far away, and we have to embrace the fast to abate idea and go for it. Frank, if you want, I can repeat the question. If not, you can answer. And I think within that question, there is a lot to do with what we've been discussing in terms of collaboration, North-South and Global South and so on. So I leave you to give us your perspective on that, and then we have to go to the end.
Very good one. So we are also operating an office in China, in Beijing. So what I'm talking about is not just, let's say, secondary knowledge. So we also engage in discussions with Chinese steel makers and the governments there. First of all, one must think of that China is really investigating to implement the carbon market also on the industry. So, and this will increase, of course, costs, maybe not that fast, but it will in the tendency increase the costs of carbon also in the production. And there is coming pressure, especially to the inefficient blast furnaces that are still being operated to come. Second, China is really embracing the scrap steel strategy. They really want to ramp up the scrap steel share in the production quite a lot. They want to manage also the blast furnace overcapacity. So there are a lot of movements on the ground politically in China that head in the right direction. And especially the scrap steel strategy is one that could also profit from HBI availability of the global south, because you can massively improve your steel quality when putting HBI into the scrap steel, because China will also face the copper problem and other quality issues with scrap. And in HBI availability, then of course that's also accounted then as green eventually, is a great opportunity to increase your quality of the steel product, that you can go with EAF products also to flat product markets. So there is an opportunity in that. There's some synergies. And I guess with the HBI development, we will also see that the production routes will somewhat converge. So there is not so much secondary, primary steel making talks anymore. It will be a converging, let's say, production chain. And the green iron makes it possible that this is happening. So from that perspective, there's a lot of in this discussion already that China would profit from. And of course, the big exporters to China, like Australia, already are also investigating strategies to go further steps down in the whole value chain. And what China does not yet embrace in the discussion, for example, like the unions-led discussions in Europe or in the US to be found, there's not so big of a fear to lose too much of the energy-intensive jobs. So China rather embraces talks at the moment in the other direction, saying, well, the world uses us as a manufacturing house, leaving its pollution also in China. So this is rather the talks that we recognize in China. So there is, I guess, appetite also from Chinese producers to engage in production in global south of HBI or intermediate products and ship them then to steel manufacturers or steel factories in China. And we see also the big Chinese players like Baowu Steel, HBIS, really embracing this route, also investigating joint venture options in the global south already. So this is something where I'm quite, I must say, optimistic when it comes to China. Of course, without China talking green steel and being climate neutral before 2050 in the steel sector is nonsense, because they hold 50% of production. So one needs to look at, but I'm quite optimistic for the time being in the direction of China's traveling to. Last word on that, NCCS surprisingly plays no role in that also in China so far. If the steel companies are investigating new options, there's little appetite of post-combustion BF-BOF CCS solutions there. I must admit, most of the technology innovation that we currently see comes around, especially the hydrogen DRI route and the direct electrification route. The Boston Metal approach is pushed forward, and this is also an option investigated in China. So there's little yet also commercial appetite to go the CCS route. At least our carbon tracker or our steel tracker doesn't show any significant projects coming under the CCUS scheme.
Thank you, Frank, for this. And this is also valid for other steel-making countries that are not able to fully decarbonize themselves if they do not collaborate with each other. So our session comes unfortunately to an end. I was really in love with the discussion that we had here. It's a really thrilling matter to be discussed and to be accelerated and to be put in the first place in our agenda, because this is something that we can do. And this is not theoretical, we can do that. It's a matter of global collaboration. It's absolutely what I see from this discussion. The summary of this discussion is, we have to have a clear demand, how much it costs. We have to sit with demand and supply. We have to sit together with the governments. They have to understand which kind of incentives and industrial policy have to be put together in order to make all these things happen. And the other lesson is more or less the title of our webinar here, which is nothing will actually happen in full if we do not have a global South collaboration. Because when I see Europe developing a lot, for example, a lot of new technologies and possibilities, they are not sustainable themselves alone, because they do not have a lot of land or a lot of renewable resources in the amount that we do have here in Brazil. So some kind of power shoring, friend shoring, collaboration, job sharing is needed for us to get where we want to be, and also for our country to make money. And this is quite of an important issue nowadays, for us to have less poor people, more money, more quality jobs coming into and flowing to our country, and not just exporting and importing things that creates job somewhere else only. We have to create jobs and share all the burden of the decarbonization together. With this final note, I thank you so much for this thrilling discussion. Verena, Frederico, Margaret, Frank, everybody. Thank you so much, and hope this will be the first of a number, and the next one we will be discussing the details on the price that is lacking to implement the grain steel market globally. Okay, bye-bye. Thank you so much.